What if the brain stopped talking to itself? Can we live without an inner monologue? The voice inside your head? Sometimes it's clear. Sometimes it's just background noise. And sometimes it never stops. Your inner voice. The one you argue with in silence. The one you tell your day to. The one you hear when you try to fall asleep. But here's the question. What if someone doesn't hear it at all? Not metaphorically, but literally. No thoughts and words. No commentary. No dialogue. Just silence. And there are many people like that. Some don't even realize that others hear a voice in their heads. And those who do can't imagine life without it. So maybe we all perceive consciousness itself differently. Chapter 1. What is inner speech? Psychologists call it inner speech. A form of thinking where thoughts take the shape of words, but without sound. It doesn't appear right away. A child first speaks out loud, commenting on their own actions. Now I'm going to take the toy. Then, around the age of 6 or 7, this process turns inward. The Soviet psychologist Lev Vygotsky believed that inner speech is simply external speech folded in. When we stop voicing our thoughts, but still think in words, we use it to plan, analyze, remember, make decisions, or simply hold an inner conversation with ourselves. But not everyone does. Chapter 2. People without an inner voice. In 2220, a discussion exploded online. A Reddit user wrote, "Just learned that not everyone has a voice in their head. How do you even think without one?" The post went viral, gathering thousands of comments. Some said, "I don't hear words. I think in images and feelings." Others replied, "What do you mean no voice? I talk to myself all day long." Later, neuroscientists joined the conversation. And it turned out, they were both right. For some people, inner speech is completely absent. Their thinking isn't verbal, but visual, associative, emotional. And for them, this is perfectly normal. Chapter 3. What happens in the brain? When a person talks to themselves, the regions responsible for speech light up, Broca's area and Wernicke's area. They work almost the same as when someone speaks out loud. In fact, inner speech is just a rehearsal of speech, performed in silence. But for those without inner speech, these regions stay quiet. Instead, the visual cortex becomes active, along with the insula and limbic system, areas tied to imagery, intuition, emotion. Their thinking is closer to sensory perception than to verbal description. They know, but can't always put into words why they know. Chapter 4. Thinking without words. Try just for a moment to imagine this. No phrases in your head. You simply see an idea, you feel the answer, but you never put it into words. It's like intuition, but for some people that's their entire way of thinking. They describe it as mental pictures, a sense of meaning, or waves of knowing. Artists, musicians, programmers, many of them report this kind of experience. They think in shapes, sounds, and patterns, and words appear only later, when it's time to explain. The brain can function without language. But then, who's doing the talking inside? Chapter 5. What the inner voice does. If some people have no inner speech while others can't make it stop, then why does the brain need it at all? The answer lies in control. Inner speech allows us to simulate possible situations, play out scenarios, rehearse the future. It keeps the self intact, as the storyteller of your own life. Because of it, you experience existence as a narrative, not just a collection of disconnected events. Without that inner voice, the story falls apart. Only fragments remain, sensations, reactions, flashes. But no narrator. Chapter 6. The price of inner dialogue. But the inner voice has a darker side. It's not always a gentle observer. Sometimes it becomes a critic. You messed up. You're late again. You're not good enough. That quiet commentary can turn into an endless hum of self-judgment. Psychologists call it rumination, the chewing of thoughts. And that's why some people dream of silence inside their heads, of the chance to simply be, without the constant commentator. Meditation, yoga, mindfulness, all of them are ways to momentarily turn the volume down on the mind. Chapter 7. When the voice disappears. There are states in which the inner speech truly vanishes. During deep meditation, in moments of flow, under psychedelics, or after certain brain injuries or epileptic episodes. People describe it as the dissolution of the observer. Thoughts don't speak anymore. Everything simply is. Neuroscientists link this to the deactivation of the posterior cingulate cortex, the region that gives rise to the sense of I. When it temporarily shuts down, the inner voice fades, and with it, the boundary between the observer and the experience. You no longer comment on reality, you merge with it. Chapter 8. Can we live without inner speech? It seems yes. The brain can operate in different modes of thought. Some people think in words, others in images. For some, the day unfolds as a story. For others, as a stream of sensations. And neither way is right. They're simply different versions of experience. Perhaps inner speech isn't a biological necessity, but a side effect of language, a tool shaped by culture. The brain can grasp reality without words, just as a computer can process data without a screen. Chapter 9. Where does consciousness live? And here a strange question arises. If inner speech isn't required, if awareness can exist without words, then where does consciousness live? Not in language, not in the muscles that form speech. Maybe not even in the brain. Some philosophers and neuroscientists, like Carl Pribram and David Bohm, once suggested that the brain might not generate consciousness at all, but receive it. It doesn't create experience, it tunes into it, like an antenna catching a signal. If that's true, then the inner monologue is merely the brain's way of giving voice to a stream of consciousness that flows from somewhere else. Chapter 10. When the voice falls silent. When the inner voice disappears, what's left is pure perception. No words, no categories, no "I think that I think." Some describe it as a state of expanded presence, where the world feels more real than it ever has before. You stop being the narrator and become the story itself. Finale. The silence, from which thoughts are born. Maybe the inner monologue is not the essence of consciousness, but only its echo. The brain speaks just to hear itself, to confirm that it exists. But beneath that speech, there is silence. From it arise images, feelings, decisions. It comes first. Maybe that is what we truly mean when we say consciousness, and all our words are merely attempts to translate it into human language. So, can we live without the inner monologue? Yes. But maybe only then do we truly begin to live, instead of just telling ourselves the story of living.